Calorie counting, slimming clubs, fasting, detoxing. What really is the best way to stay healthy through the food we eat? Welcome to this podcast from Which. Hello, I'm James Rowe, here to bring you the second part of this podcast series, giving you expert advice and recommendations to help you live your best life every day. Today, we've got two experts lined up to help us focus on diet and nutrition. First of all, let's welcome Shefali Loth, a public health nutritionist here at Which. Shefali, hello.
Hello.
Good to have you here. And Professor Giles Yeo, a geneticist from Cambridge University. Hello.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here as well. Well, shall we start with the basics around this? What is the best reason to diet in the first place, or indeed to stick to a certain diet? Is it purely for weight loss?
No, I think there are lots of reasons why you might want to watch what you eat, and health is a major one. In the UK, we have a real problem. Well, worldwide, we have a real problem with people suffering with overweight and obesity. And there are a whole host of illnesses that are linked to being overweight. It increases your risk of diabetes, of heart disease, of many types of cancer. So there's a real reason why we should be healthy.
And a lot of these reasons you mention are kind of after effects of not being on the right diet or not eating the right food to begin with, right?
Is it true that the vast majority of non-communicable diseases today are diet-related? Undoubtedly. So this includes obesity and all of this related illnesses. So I guess, yes, if it's non-infectious, the likelihood of diet playing a role is pretty high.
And I think there's almost a misconception, I think, with the word diet. I think a lot of people might think when somebody says, "Oh, I'm on a diet," they might think, negative connotations. It makes it seem like they're doing it because they want to lose weight. But we should all be on the right diet, shouldn't we?
Absolutely. And your diet is just what you're eating. Now, you're right. People think diet means diet plans and restrictions, and that's not necessarily the case. We have the Mediterranean diet, which is a recommended diet that actually we all follow. And that just means eating lots of fruit and vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, and olive oil. Lots of countries in the world follow that diet generally anyway.
I mean, diet actually comes. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, please.
But just for some historical context, because diet actually comes from the Greek word dieta, which means a way of life. And so forever, diet has been a way of life. It's only recently that it has become something of exclusion that we actually discuss, rather than something that should be a way of our life.
It's almost just a byword for lifestyle, then, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Your diet is your lifestyle. And because we're talking about the food, and clearly food is such a big part of our lifestyle, it should be a joyous topic to talk about, rather than spoken about with exclusion and furrowed brow, I think.
And obviously, a lot of people do take up a particular diet. We'll talk about some of them today for weight loss. Generally, how easy is it or difficult is it to actually lose weight via the right diet?
Do you know what? I think most diets, there are some bat crazy diets, bleep diets out there, but most diets actually do work, at least in the short term, at least for some people. So the trick, as it turns out, is not the weight loss bit of it, which most people can sort of grit their teeth and get through and lose the weight. The trick is the maintenance. And I think that is the most difficult part. And people say 95% of diets don't work. It's not true. 95% of diets you can't stick to. So I think that is the problem.
So you're speaking about kind of keeping it up and doing it for the long term.
Yeah.
You might be able to do it for 2 weeks or something, but doing it over a few months, it gets difficult.
Correct.
Well, shall we chat about some of the diets that are out there that people do take up? Calorie counting, that's what I want to start with. It's something you can do quite easily, and I think more recently as well, apps on our phones have made it even easier.
Yeah, and ultimately, if you're going to lose weight, you've got to have a calorie deficit. And traditionally, if we think back to the 70s, 80s, most diets were about calorie counting. But actually, we know now that it's not just about calories. And Giles has written a really good book about this. So I'm going to hand over to Giles to explain it.
I mean, when we talk about this and talk about calories, and the moment you disagree with the whole concept of calorie restriction, or for that matter, a calorie deficit, immediately you become anti-physics. No, I'm not anti-physics. We're not. So I think the main issue with calories it gives you only one piece of information. So 200 calories of chips is twice the portion of 100 calories of chips. But so is 200 calories of carrots, twice the portion of 100 calories of carrots. And no one is trying to compare chips and carrots. So I think calories tell you how much food is there, particularly when you're talking about one type of food, but that's it. It gives you nothing about the nutritional content of the food, which I would argue we should be focusing on more.
I think the main point with this one is all calories aren't the same. We don't count them the same, do we? It's not as if you could sit there and eat purely carrots all day and expect to hit sort of the right nutritional goals, could you?
Yeah, absolutely. And Giles, in his book, talks about how, well, caloric availability, is that it?
Caloric availability is the amount of calories you can extract from a food as opposed to the total number of calories stuck in the food. So I think people always think we eat calories, we don't eat calories, we eat food, and then our body extracts the calories. So depending on what we eat, your body has to work more or less hard to then extract the calories. The calories are all equal once they're in you as a little poof of energy, but they have to first be consumed as food, and that takes energy to sort of break down.
And some foods are harder to get calories from. Is that what we're trying to say?
Yeah. So famously, I mean, like the celery, right? Celery or the celery, but famously celery, where people say, sort of like it's negative calories. It's not actually negative calories. I think that's slightly overstating it. But a medium stick of celery really only has around 6 calories, so it's nearly negative. What's interesting is if you cook the celery, if you chop it up, you put it into a stew, whatever you're going to do with it, you suddenly increase the caloric availability of the celery to 30 calories. So raw celery is 6 calories to a human being, not a nuclear power plant, right? Whereas cooked celery is worth 30 calories to us. We haven't added calories. Just by cooking it has increased the caloric availability of the celery.
Fascinating, hey?
Yeah.
We're all learning here. Should we do some quick basics on calories as well? How many calories should we be getting a day? Just the quick basics here.
I mean, roughly about 2,000 for an adult. But obviously, you and I are very different. Giles and I are very different. So my calorie intake requirements are probably lower. I'm a female. I'm shorter, I might weigh less, so, I don't need as many calories as somebody much bigger, somebody who's doing a manual job, who's doing a lot of physical exercise are going to need more calories too.
So what are our conclusions on calorie counting as a particular diet? Where do we stand? What should we wrap up with for this one?
I think if you're going to calorie count, you got to reduce everything in a balanced way. So in other words, if you're having a relatively healthy diet but eating too much of it, hence you are heavier, if you sort of reduce everything by 10%, you will lose weight, right? The problem is when you take it to the extreme and say, oh, my diet says a 400 calorie for lunch, and then you eat a chocolate bar because it's 400 calories. That's obviously not the way to go. So I think, yes, by all means, if it's a strategy of reducing stuff, make sure you do it balanced across your diet rather than with just an individual food.
I agree 100%.
Lovely stuff. Well, shall we move on to juicing and detox diets? Shefali, what's the idea with these?
Okay, what's the idea? The idea is that our bodies are full of toxins, and so we have to reduce those toxins that we're putting in, but actually our bodies have inbuilt detoxification systems. Our heart, our lungs, our kidneys, our livers do that for us. So, I'm really anti anything called detox. Usually it basically involves cutting out food groups, and those are often things like dairy, complex carbs, gluten, things that aren't inherently bad for you, unless, of course, you're celiac or something like that. But actually, these food groups provide really important nutrients in our diet. And by cutting them out, ultimately, you're reducing your calorie intake, so you lose weight.
And they almost demonize certain foods in that aspect, don't they?
That's exactly it. Yeah, they demonize foods that shouldn't really be demonized. Dairy, for example, is a really important source of calcium in our diets. And so when people are cutting out all dairy products, there's a real risk that they're going to end up with calcium deficiencies. Giles, would you add anything to that?
No. I think the word detox has come from actually, if you drink too much alcohol, if you're taking a drug of abuse, you detox by stopping said items, right? There is no way to sort of eat something to speed up the detox, which is what I think a lot of this juicing things is supposed to say. It speeds up the detox. So first of all, we shouldn't be excluding whole food groups, and second of all, for sure, even after a particularly, heavy Christmas period or what have you, nothing you can actually eat will detox you faster. So you just, by all means, do dry January and something like that to cut down on your alcohol. That, I guess, is quote-unquote detoxing. Anything else is you need your liver, you need your kidneys. If they're not working, you need the hospital.
Yeah, I feel like we always hear about these kind of diets, post-Christmas into January, and then people sort of think, oh, well, this is going to do me the world of good, but it's not necessarily if you're not getting the right intake of food.
No, and absolutely, especially with things like juicing diets, actually you're really restricting your calorie intake there. You're juicing basically fruits and vegetables. They're not going to keep you full. So these kind of diets, you might lose weight quite quickly on them because you've drastically reduced your calorie intake, but the moment you go back to eating normally, all that weight is going to come back on.
You might really reduce your calorie intake, but interestingly, by juicing, typically you remove the vast majority, if not all of the fiber from the food, which then increases the caloric availability, A, which means that the calories are far more available, and B, suddenly you're drinking a whole hell of a lot of sugar without the fiber involved. So, people don't know this, but when you juice an orange and drink orange juice has exactly the same sugar concentration as a soda, as Coca-Cola, okay? 10 to 12%, depending on how sweet the orange is. And it's not better sugar for you because it's natural. So I think juicing has a couple of problems where it removes, first of all, you're now removing whole food groups. Second, you're removing the fiber. And third, you're suddenly pumping yourself with sugar. It's like, it's not a win-win. It's a lose-lose as far as I can gather.
Absolutely. Like I think about, if you think about eating an orange, that will fill you up. It takes time, and you'll get the sugar from that one orange. But as Giles says, it's tied up in the fiber, in the fruit, so you won't get all of that. All of the calories contained in that orange. If you drink a glass of orange juice, it's got the sugar of about 6 or 7 oranges in it. And you can consume that a lot quicker than you can consume an orange. So actually, you'll really concentrating that sugar. It's much more available to you, and it's terrible for your teeth.
That's the point I was going to get to. You're saying if we're drinking these juices, it's, Giles, you said it's like having a soda. It's not doing the world of good, is it?
No.
In the mouth?
No, and it won't fill you up either. So actually, that's why it's so hard to stick to these juicing diets, because you're probably hungry all the time. I've not tried one, I can't tell you.
It is actually, if people always ask, what's the worst food for you? And maybe we'll get to this point. And obviously, it's a difficult question to answer because it's what you eat too much of. But actually, juices are one of my banes in life. Because, and here's the thing, no one thinks a soda is healthy. You think, I'm having a soda. This is not healthy, but I'm enjoying the soda. People think juices are healthy, and so they drink a lot of it. So this is one of the foods which sort of has this halo of health, which actually, certainly from a sugar perspective, is no better than a soda.
Here's one for you then. I've got a busy day in the office today. I'm probably going to go to a supermarket and get a meal deal for my lunch because I'm busy and it's something quick. Should I buy a soda as the drink, or should I buy one of those health juices as a drink? Or something else entirely?
Now, you see, you're asking a complex question. Because within the context of a meal, sure, it's fine to have a glass of orange juice or a soda or what have you. I think if you treat the orange juice like you're treating the soda, you have it within the context of a meal because you just want something else to drink, then I think everything is fine. The problem is if you think I'm drinking this as a health food and you're sort of mainlining it and this is the only thing I drink because therefore this is healthy for me, that is when the problems, I think, begin. So I think you should have what you have for your lunch that you enjoy.
Yeah. And you're not having it instead of your meal, are you? And that's what these detox juicing diets are. You're not eating, you're actually replacing your meal with this juice.
So don't just have a big bottle of that smoothie or whatever.
Absolutely.
No.
Do not.
Well, yeah, I'm getting the stare from
Don't. Anyone listening, don't.
It's a firm no. It's a firm no. Well, shall we move on to Intermittent fasting. I guess a 5-2 diet might fit into this. I think we've all heard of this one, haven't we?
Yeah, I think intermittent fasting, there's lots of types, as you say. There's the 5-2, which basically means you eat normally for 5 days of the week, and then on 2 days you severely restrict your calories. And I think it's between 500 and 600 calories a day. And then an alternative is time-restricted fasting. So that might be the 16-8, where you eat for an 8-hour window. So that might be from noon till 8 p.m. And then you fast for 16 hours. And so basically what these diets do is they restrict the amount you eat on the fasting day. So on a 16-8 diet, for example, you're basically cutting out breakfast. And on a 5-2, 2 days a week, you're really restricting your calories. So over the week, you probably end up with a calorie deficit. I think these diets work for some people. I think, the 5-2 is quite hard work, and people do complain about having headaches, feeling lethargic, not being able to concentrate on those days. Whereas the 16-8, I tend not to have breakfast until about 10:30 anyway. Giles has said he hasn't had breakfast this morning. So if you're not someone who wakes up hungry, then actually that might suit your lifestyle better.
Are you doing the 16-8 diet, or is it just so happens you've not had breakfast?
I'm not. It's just during the weekday I don't have breakfast. So over the weekend I had brunch. I woke up. I did the thing. I had pancakes. So no, I'm doing this only because I get up. I hop on my. Today I came to London, obviously, but I get up. I hop on my bike. I get to work, and then the first meal I have is lunch. So no, I'm not doing the 16-8.
What do you think about intermittent fasting? Does it, Shefali says it can work for some people. What do you think?
So a lot of people do it. A lot of people enjoy it. I personally hate it because I love my food so much. I tried it, actually. I tried it for a month for a program I was doing. And I love my food so much, okay? I professionally and recreationally, I love my food. I was miserable during the 2 days I was doing, and my version was the 600 calories.
I've done that as well.
And I'm so miserable that the other 5 days that I'm supposed to be eating normally, I was stressed out about how miserable I was going to feel. So I spent the entire time feeling miserable. So for me, it didn't suit me. But I do know it suits other people's temperament because you don't buy different types of food. You just eat less on those 2 days. It works for some people. It didn't work for me.
I guess it also doesn't work if on your normal days you then binge all the other things and you eat in excess. Yeah. And same on the 16-8. If you then eat constantly between the hours of noon and 8, it's not going to have a difference.
Yeah, because the idea is not to try and make up for the fact that
you're not trying to cram it in. It's just the idea that it reduces your overall intake.
We are not anti-physics, as we said.
So I think what we're learning so far is that it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
That's right. And that's the case for all diets, really.
And something I think we'll probably get onto in the second half as well. We'll pause for a second. After the break, we'll be looking at some other diet options and exploring whether something called Zoe could be the answer to your problems. Welcome back. Shefali and Giles are still with us. Let's do the keto diet. This is all about limiting some carbs in your diet. Where should we go with this one?
Yeah, basically keto, also known as Atkins, also known as paleo diet, and several other names, no doubt, is basically really restricting your complex carb intake. So usually to around 20 to 50 grams a day, so about 5% of calories. Whereas I think for the general population, we probably get around 50% of our calories from complex carbs. So basically you up your protein and fat intake and you really reduce your carbohydrate intake.
And when we're talking about carbs, what is this? Pasta, rice?
Yeah, bread, pasta, rice.
Sugar.
Yeah, importantly. So anything that I say I love, basically.
I was going to say, as soon as you say that, I'm thinking, well, I might have some toast for breakfast. Oh, that's gone. I'm going to have pasta for my lunch. Oh, that's gone. Yeah.
So your breakfast would have been an omelette this morning.
Yes.
Not your omelette in a baguette.
Yes, yeah. So I think, what's the science behind this one? We get a lot of calories from carbs, so limiting this or taking them out entirely is almost like a fast-tracked version of limiting the amount of calories.
Well, you're cutting out a major food group, basically. So yes, it's about reducing your intake. I guess also protein does take longer to digest. It can make you feel fuller for longer. So the idea is, the premise of the keto is that actually you don't eat as much. But again, we've talked about restricting food groups and how that's not good. You know, complex carbs provide really important nutrients, most of all fiber. So if you cut out a big source of fiber from your diet, that does have a knock-on effect on your digestive system. People on the keto diet often complain about headaches and things because they're not getting that glucose from the food that they're eating.
Why do you think these are so popular, Giles? Because they are, aren't they?
They're hugely popular. They're hugely popular because there's this fear of carbs. I think we probably do have too much refined carbs, so either the sugar form or white flour, probably too much. But the fear of carbs is entirely hysterical, and I think it sort of builds into that. Look, the whole class of low carb, high fat diets are probably effective for a couple of things. First of all, if you are diabetic and trying to control your blood sugar level, something like a low carb diet, particularly low in refined carbohydrates, is probably a very good way, type 1 or type 2, but of maintaining your sugar levels. Fine, okay, in terms of doing that. Actually, the keto diet was originally developed for epilepsy. And it's odd because the reason why it's called a keto diet is because when you burn lots of fat, what comes out are ketones, okay? And ketones have a general feeling of making you feel fuller, but also your brain only uses sugar. It doesn't use fat at all, unlike the rest of our body. It can sometimes use ketones under stress. And for whatever reason we don't know, is that if the brain uses the ketones, it is less likely to go into some kind of epileptic shock. Okay? And this is the reason why it was developed for it. But what has happened is that these diets that were then developed for specific diseases, specific conditions, with a biochemical reason, with a sugar, things like that, have suddenly, because they do make you feel fuller, been sort of taken up by the general populace. And it's interesting. There are no long-term studies at the moment about the safety of a true keto diet, which is really quite extreme. And so we'll have to see in the long term, as more and more studies are done, how safe it actually is.
I think also it's really worth saying here is they're so popular because actually people who follow them will experience really quite rapid weight loss in that initial phase. And so, for a short period of time, it can give you that little boost that you need if you're trying to lose weight and you can see those pounds falling off. That can kickstart you on your plan. It can make you feel better, like you're actually doing something. But as Giles said, there's no, the evidence about doing it long term really doesn't exist.
And it's quite difficult to do long term. Yeah. It's really, as Shefali says, carbs are a requirement. Is one of these things where fat in of itself is actually quite unpalatable. You shouldn't have a stick of butter. You shouldn't. But fat and carbs mixed together, everything nice is a mix of fat and carbs. If you think about it, ice cream, pasta, pastry, chocolate, all of it.
Why is all the good stuff unhealthy? Eh? The science behind that is there's something wrong there. But I guess this is one of these, isn't it, where it can be so effective in the short term and it can give people so much motivation, but then in the long term to keep it up, it becomes quite difficult.
Yeah. And really, when you do start introducing or reintroducing those carbs, a lot of the weight will come back on.
Right then, we're now going to introduce Zoe. Now, this isn't another guest who's going to join us in the studio, but this is a personalised nutrition program. Isn't that right?
That's right. That's the way it's marketed. So, you sign up for the Zoe plan and you receive some kit in the post, you do some tests, and then the idea is that you use the app that comes as part of the program to plan your meals, and the idea is that it offers you a personalised nutrition plan.
And it's had quite a boom in the last year or so, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's everywhere since it launched. It's been covered widely. You might see people walking down the street with a little glucose monitor, yellow patch on their arm. It's been widely covered.
And it has been widely covered here at Which as well, because you have given it a go.
It has, and I have, because I think since it launched, it's probably the thing I've been asked about the most at Which. And so we thought, okay, well, let's give it a go. I was intrigued as well. It sounds great on paper. And I had friends who tried it, who raved about it. So last year I signed up and gave it a whirl for 6 months.
So give us a little bit of introduction then. So you sign up online and then they send you, I think you said a kit in the post, right?
Yeah, so it's not cheap. The price actually has come down since we did it last year, but I think the starter kit is still about £299.
Wow.
And then if you sign up for 4 months, it's $24.99 a month. But if you sign up for a year, it's now, I think the annual cost has gone down to $9.99 a month. But you get a kit in the post, which contains a continuous glucose monitor that you attach to your upper arm for up to 14 days. You get some test cookies, and then you get a kit where you send off a poo sample, basically, so they can analyse your microbiome. The test day is really difficult. Like attaching the glucose monitor, a breeze, but eating those cookies is hard.
Are they not delicious?
They are not delicious. They are really, really sweet. And you've got to eat them in a window. And I do remember just really, really struggling to get through the pack. So you eat 1 pack of cookies, monitor your glucose monitor will measure your glucose levels, and then 4 hours later you eat another set, which is blue, I believe. And then you then have to look at your poo for a few days to see where it turns blue, and then you send off all that information back to Zoe, and they analyze your sample. And basically you get 3 results. You get how well your body metabolizes glucose, how well it metabolizes fat, and then you get a microbiome rating, like how many good bacteria does your microbiome contain and how many bad bacteria.
It sounds very scientific then.
Exactly. And I think that's why it's almost people are blinded by the science. I guess it sounds really good. You know, we live in a data-led world now. We game our steps, we game everything. So this is almost like an extension of that.
And what are you paying for then? Because you said it's got a very high price point. You know, once you've sent all that data away, they give you these results.
Yeah.
What are you then paying for on an ongoing basis?
Okay, so on an ongoing basis, you are paying for access to that app. And so once you get your results, like, for example, my results said I have a good response to glucose, I have a bad response to fat, and my microbiome was terrible.
And how did that make you feel?
It made me feel terrible. Out of, I think, 50 good bacteria, I only have 2, and I had 20 of the bad. Now, a bit of a disclaimer, I do have a history of Crohn's disease, but I had surgery 20 years ago and I've been symptom-free. And, you know, I eat a lot of whole grains, I eat a lot of fruit and veg, so I actually was really surprised at how poor my gut microbiome was. And I fretted about it for a couple of days and then thought, well, actually, what are the effects of having a poor microbiome? Am I tired all the time? Am I ill all the time? And I'm not. So I thought, well, actually, I'm not going to stress about it. I'll just carry on eating well and eating where I can. And yeah.
And is it then going to give you a food plan, or what else does it give you?
Yeah, so what you do on an ongoing basis is you log your meals on the app, and then it gives you a rating. So it color codes the meals from basically red, you shouldn't have them very often, to dark green, where eat freely. And so over the day, you log what you eat and drink, and then it gives you a rating for the day. And whilst I was doing the app, it also gave you some suggestions about how to improve your meals, but generally that was add more fruit and veg and add some nuts and seeds. So you learn pretty quickly how to make your meals healthier, and it's not like I didn't know that already. And really, it then gets a bit tedious logging your meals constantly. So once you know how to make your meals healthier, you can pretty much do that without having the need to log your meals.
Giles, you've been listening to this with me. What are your thoughts on Zoe?
I think the concept of personalized nutrition is the way to go. I mean, I think we've discussed that there are no right diets. It's the right diet for you, right? And this is a way, or at least an attempt to actually achieve that. The problem is, what kind of data are they collecting in order to try and do so? I mean, we'll start with the microbiome, the poo, right? And you say that, oh my God, you only had 2 good ones and 48 bad ones. Compared to whom? See, this is the problem, right? So in other words, if you, I mean, I'm guessing you're South Asian, right? And I'm East Asian. We have, at the moment, microbiome science is very cutting edge. And actually, it will be important because it's the first thing our food actually hits. But we don't even have the basics. Like, I'm ethnically Chinese. I mean, born in the UK, but ethnically Chinese. We have no idea, right? Even between the Chinese person, East Asian person, and a South Asian person, what our microbiomes are going to differ by. And actually, even between me, if I was raised in Shanghai versus here raised in Cambridge, what my microbiome difference would be, we have no idea. So I think trying to say that you have good or bad bacteria, I think what is clear is that the more varied of the type of bugs you actually have in your poo, the better it is. There's some really bad players, 1 or 2. C. difficile is a classic example. But broadly speaking, everything else, it's just still out there. So good or bad, I think, is a bad term. And then the second thing is the glucose monitor. Now, once again, the glucose monitor is good because it actually measures a direct output into your behavior. If I have a chocolate bar versus an apple versus something like that, your glucose is personalized to you and is immediately reflective of what you eat. The problem is, like the calorie that we talked about recently, it gives you one piece of information. It gives you the sugar. It doesn't give you the complex hormonal changes that react to the food you eat. And if you only use sugar as a harbinger for the health of your food, then I'll give you an example, all right? Now, clearly, we eat too much sugar. I think but if we take a look at, based on your sugar levels in your blood going up, a boiled potato, which will put up your sugar, obviously, because it's a potato. Whereas if you actually eat a roast potato in goose fat, right, like I had last night, that will not make your glucose levels go up anywhere as high. And no one in their right mind, even though I love a roast potato, is going to say that a roast potato is healthier for you than a boiled potato.
Oh, I thought you were going to give us a pass, just eat roast potatoes all the time. Oh, I thought it was good news there.
But I think that's the point. It's a single dimensional measure. It's more complex than that, and that's fine. And I think we need these monitors are out there. I think we need to sort of forward the science more about what they can actually tell us. I think it's oversimplified, I do believe, within the Zoe situation.
Yeah, I agree, because I think one scenario we talked about was actually, you know, an apple will increase your glucose level more than a piece of fried chicken. But is your takeaway message that the fried chicken is healthier than the apple? Absolutely not. But if all you're looking at is the glucose output, then that's the message that you take home.
So I think, Giles, you said the word complex twice there, and, you know, oversimplified. It's on the right track. Zoe's definitely on the right track. Is that what we're saying?
I mean, if it encourages people to think about what they're eating, it increases their plant foods, it increases the variety of plant foods they're eating, then that is an absolutely positive thing. But I didn't leave my experience of the app thinking that that was really personalised to me, because actually you should be increasing your plant foods, and so should Giles, and so should we all. And it's not that, so it's just, I don't believe it was personalised to me.
And from a price point?
It's expensive. And actually what's really surprising about it is once you stop paying the subscription, you lose access to all your results. So I no longer have access to my blood sugar results, or my fat results, or even my microbiome.
So the conclusion, it can be beneficial, but a bit pricey, and so there are positives, there are negatives.
Absolutely. And, you know, some people really benefit from that logging of their meals. It keeps them on track. It holds them accountable. But for me, I just found that really boring and laborious.
Right, before we wrap up then, I want to touch on weight loss pills, which seemed to be kind of the big thing quite a few years ago. Now, are we moving into the territory of weight loss jabs, Giles?
So weight loss pills in the past would have been almost drugs in the way that we use the word drugs. Amphetamines, things that sort of mess about with the small molecules, all kinds of things that kind of mess about with your brain. And I think very, very, very few of them in the weight loss pill category are still on the market. They're very, very few. These weight loss injections then came about, okay, and they're modified versions of normal hormones that you actually release when you eat. And most of these hormones make you feel fuller. So in effect, they're just modified hormones that make you feel fuller, and so you eat less. Then we have suddenly come full circle back to the weight loss pill again, because now the manufacturers of these jabs, these injections, which are once weekly to once monthly, depending on which make you're using, have now sort of, at least one or two of the manufacturers have managed to take that compound, or these versions of that compound, and put it back into a pill. So it's not as effective. These pill version of the gut hormones are not as effective yet as the injections, but they work in the same way. But I think these weight loss pills, let's see, they're still in trials. They're not available yet. Let's see how effective they are in the long term. Are they better than the jabs, the injections? And we'll see what happens.
And there are also, I guess, the ones that you can buy over the counter, like the fat blockers, which are available, right?
Do you know the problem is when you block fat? So the fat blockers, this is to stop your body absorbing the fat. And that's fine in general if we believe in the one-dimensionality of the fat being a problem. But leaving that aside, the main issue is, once again, there's physics involved. If you don't absorb the fat, it's gotta go somewhere. And we have a one-way tube. Things go in one way, and if you're well, come out the other end. That's the process. So if you don't absorb the fat, you have oily poo. It is a terrible thing to have oily poo. And actually, these fat blockers work primarily not because your body absorbs less fat. That was with their design, but because the side effects are so unpleasant that you know that actually I am just not going to have this, whatever the hell's happening back there, if I don't have as much fat in my food. And so they work because you change your behavior rather than any biochemical reason.
They work, but not necessarily in the intended way of making them work.
And there are better ways of getting yourself to eat less out there, I think. And oily poo is just not the answer.
Certainly a phrase we're all going to take away from today. Let's wrap up then. I think I've touched on this already, but there's certainly not a one-size-fits-all solution to diet or weight loss. It's an individual journey, isn't it?
Absolutely. We're not the same. We're all different shapes and sizes, and I think we have to accept that. And what works for me won't necessarily work for you.
Giles, it's just about making sure we eat the right amount of the right food and not too much of the wrong food.
Who is it? Oscar Wilde that said, I'm going to paraphrase Oscar Wilde badly, everything in moderation, including moderation. And it's very boring, and actually it's quite difficult, but it is the truth, because it's got to suit you biologically, but it also has to suit your lifestyle. So are you a parent? Do you work shifts? Are you a teenager? Are you pregnant? There are many, many, many things which you have to take into account, as well as your biology, for a diet to quote unquote work for you, to be able to stick to that diet.
Well, plenty of food for thought there. Giles, I didn't mean that as a pun either, but it works anyway. Giles, thanks so much for coming in.
You're very welcome.
And Shafali, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.